All right, so here we go. We got Pretty. She's a death adder. She must be, what, 50 to 60 centimetres long. Total length, they can grow to is about 90 centimetres.
What is this
They
one?
do stink.
Oh, no, I don't like that.
That's a tiger snake. They got... Tigers have a massive reputation for chasing people. Tiger snakes, people talk about, they're always just after people and stuff. It's not necessarily the case at all. They're just like any
Ty,
snake.
can you not let it come over by me, bro? Please.
We've got, the king, arguably one of the most biggest venomous snakes in Australia as well. Pseudechis australis, or commonly known as the Mulga or king brown.
Wow.
I guess even with the venom, as you were saying before, no one's actually died from a king brown bite since 1969. All right, so next species on the list, genus of brown snake, Pseudonasia affinis, or commonly known as the Dugite.
Yeah, this one seems to like getting his head up off the ground.
Yeah, so, and you sort of see that flattening a little bit, and that's that defensive brown snake posture.
Oh, I heard it.
Yeah.
I heard it make the noise.
From my experience, especially with the brown snakes, when you do hear them hiss, it's probably because they're getting annoyed.
Yeah. Are you guys sure?
Absolutely. Given their short nature as well, they're probably one of the hardest snakes at times just to get a perfect balance and to try to bring them out. They can be, whereas some of the bigger ones you can get a hook on in this nice cool environment. They'll just come out and you can plop them down. Awesome.
So
My
here we
name is
have
Pretty.
Pretty.
All right, so here we go. We got Pretty. She's a death adder. She must be, 50 to 60 centimetres long. Total length, they can grow to is about 90 centimetres. I would really struggle that you would actually come across a death adder that's 90 centimetres long. That's going to be a very large animal. We have quite a few of them at Snake RnR in our training stock, so to speak, and this is one of the largest ones that we do have. So when you drop down in size or you go up in size, you really only need to do like a 10 centimetre adjustment either way, and you kind of nearly get a double in the body mass or a halving. So the next one down must be 50 odd centimetres long, and you could see that would be at least half as big or half as thick. So for the length that they get, they really bulk up and put on a lot of mass for that body profile. They have a very similar head, which is another myth which is kicking around about, only pythons have that diamond-shaped head, whereas she's got a very large diamond-shaped head as well. So that misconception of, potentially being a venomous, or a python, sorry, not a venomous snake, but yeah, it can, really, really fuel that sort of feud of going around of that myth, that head shape, which really isn't true at all. So
It's got a pretty cool colouring. I like the colouring on it.
yeah,
Really-
there's a few different species of the genus of death adder. So depending on where you are, they may vary in colour. But one thing that they normally always have in common is they're going to have bands. So whether they're a light colour like a red dusty dirt colour or a very dark colour, on close inspection you will notice that they all have a band. It's one thing that stands out as well with the death adder. So I'm not sure if you can see it quite clearly, but on the very tip of her tail, it is actually a slightly different colour. So all of our Australian snakes, pythons, mildly venomous, highly venomous, they all actively hunt their prey. The death adder does not. It's very lazy in the way it hunts, and it uses a technique which is called cauderal luring. So that little tail tip, they'll bury themselves down, shimmy themselves down in either soft sand or underneath leaf litter, things like that. That tail will stick up in the air and start wriggling around, mimicking a worm.
Wow.
So small birds, other reptiles, rodents, things that think that a worm is a food source for them, come rushing in, bang, grab onto that tail, not knowing that they have arguably the fastest striking snake in the world sitting right underneath that tail.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Is it?
And it's one of those ones now you've got people that want to argue who's the fastest and that very hard thing, but it's for a very long time they've actually referred to this snake as the world's fastest striking snake. It's phenomenal. And the dexterity in that tip of the tail is wicked. It's like a little maggoty worm.
It is,
I was going to ask, why is the snake so massive all the way down to the last 100 mil of its tail?
Well, essentially that's where the tail, the cloaca of what we call snakes is. So obviously that little bit where it tapers off from that cloaca back, that's what we call the snake's tail. The rest of it is essentially the body.
Wow.
So all snakes will have that taper, and it's generally around that 5 to 15% mark or length of the body is the tail. With the death adders being that they're very stout, stocky for how long they are, it's a lot more noticeable on these guys.
Yeah. It's a ton of muscle mass just packed into it, and that's where that really fast explosive strike. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe the explosive. Oh shit, man. Yeah, I'm scared now. The explosives. I know. It's just cool, calm, collected.
Yeah.
Is this the one that you can stomp around on the ground close to it, and it's only when it comes, you put your boot down on top of it that it will strike? Not really.
Yes and no. I wouldn't go out there trying to test that fact, but like
I heard.
Generally speaking, when they go into their defensive display or when they feel threatened, what they do when they feel threatened is pretty much freeze, and they use that camouflage that they possess to hopefully go unnoticed from that predator that's in the area. Us being humans, we're predators to them because we're not on their food list. Yep. So snakes have a very generic, and it's called a reptilian brain. So it's basically got two thought processes. It's either it's prey or it's predator. It's so black and white like that, and there's not really anything in between. So if I'm not eating you, you're out there to get me.
Okay.
So that's why you see snakes have such a strong defensive display towards you if you're in that close proximity. But then obviously when left alone or you back yourself away from, their first means of escape is that's what they want to do. Get out of there.
What about seeing us? Seeing us and hearing us.
So snakes, first of all, snakes don't have the best of eyesight. They are able to see in colour. They are able to see movement. Generally speaking, when that movement stops, it somewhat blends into the back. So, if you were to be moving around, they would notice that. If you were to be stationary, they may not necessarily be able to see you that well, but all of the snake's tongues, that forked tongue that comes out, that picks up scent particles. Us as human beings, we're warm-blooded. We emit a pheromone. That pheromone gets translated into a scent. They can pick up scent particles for up to 1 kilometre away. So pretty well any snake that you ever come in contact with will know that you're there well before you've even seen that snake.
In the right conditions,
In the right conditions, yeah.
1 kilometre away, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they don't really rely on their eyesight. It's that tongue that really does not just the food, whether it's prey, predator, it's also navigation. So at night time where generally most snakes are out hunting, it's not that they're nocturnal, it's just the food that they are after is generally out at that time, being the rodents. They don't need to be able to see because that tongue can essentially guide them back to what they call their shelter. They'll leave their own scent trail in their shelter, go out, hunt, look for water, and they know exactly how to get home from that tongue in pitch black darkness.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And of course, there's always going to be some that are slightly better at seeing than others. You've got blind snakes, we've got burrowing snakes, they're terrible, they're way worse. And then you've got whip snakes that are typically around the diurnal species around during the day, slightly better eyesight, but it's that phenomenal scent of exactly everything Ty said. That phenomenal ability to pick up a scent is absolutely mind-blowing for how well they can pick things up.
How often do they shed their skin?
Once again, it'll be species dependent and then size dependent because generally speaking, the reason why or the main reason why is for growth. So they don't gain scales. When they're born, they have the exact same amount of scales as they are when they get to an adult. So that layer of skin is removed so the scales can expand. So if you think like a baby snake growing quite quickly is going to shed a lot more often than an adult snake that's fully grown. Just because it's fully grown doesn't mean it's not going to shed. It still will shed, but it's obviously going to really pull back on the frequency that it does shed. So it's a bit of a tough question. I don't have an exact answer for you, say 4 times a year, 8 times a year, and species dependent. But generally speaking, it's because of growth. But there's other means that can encourage a shed as well. So pre and post breeding for the adults, and obviously if there's mites, parasites, things like that under the skin, they can kind of just flick the switch and go into that shed process to try to remove that.
When was the last time she was fed?
Well, that'd be a Corrine question. One of the ladies that does the husbandry work for us.
It's looking.
It would have been within the last couple of weeks. I didn't check her feed folder before I grabbed her because she's not doing a great deal today. And I grabbed her because she was probably the easiest as far as her death adders go. You pick up the most of her on camera because a lot of ours, as Ty said, are actually smaller than her.
Really?
And really cool. Yeah, really cool snake. And
that is really cool.
Yeah, I've always love the death adder, but it's still, to me, this is one of the easiest snakes to look at and immediately go, that's a death adder, but this is a snake responsible for people misidentifying.
Yeah.
Pilbara is a great example where they're getting this coloration and they go, small diamond-shaped head, it's a pygmy python.
No.
And people, people have misidentified that, and or at least that's what the stories are. And both Ty and I have fed them numerous times. The speed, it's not like any other snake we have. The speed of their strike is phenomenal. Sometimes still makes you jump, not from the snake striking, just from the sheer speed, from nothing to.
So are you feeding them frozen? Like already dead.
Yeah,
mice or
which is a
rats
legal
or-
requirement. Yeah.
It is? So you can't feed them.
Can't feed them live, which is also about protecting the snake too, because the snake doesn't want to eat and it gets trapped inside. And
the rodent might
the
try and
rodent
hurt
might turn. Yeah, and I've seen rodents where people that I've known many years ago go, I've got snakes, and they'll go and chuck it in, and you go, this is someone that knows what they're doing. That's sarcasm, sorry.
Yeah, I've got that.
They chucked it in, and a rat has turned on a python that was not eating. It was probably in a high stress situation, and it's really torn into it. And that's when we talk about venomous snakes. You look at a lot of where our Australian venomous snakes, their toxics is so strong, because if you look at so many of their prey they go after, this is one theory, is that without them having such a strong toxic, and with all of their prey living in such a harsh land, we're the driest continent in the world, these animals need to burrow down, so have sharp teeth, sharp claws to get into a harsh Australian ground. And without that very toxic venom, these animals wouldn't keel over and die straight away. So they'd have a chance to turn back and start tearing at the snake, and they could do serious damage, which would be irreversible, and these guys just wouldn't have survived. So their venom is modified over, millions of years, but from saliva up into venom. And even our leopards that have our fangs at the front, those fixed front fangs are at the front. Traditionally snakes started off with rear fangs, so like the colubrids that are still around today, and then some snakes have then actually evolved to those fangs coming to the front.
Why'd they have them at the back?
They still do. It's just a majority of venomous snakes in the world are from that Colubridae family, and they still, to this day, have the fangs at the rear. And it's just been their requirements for where they're eating. It's because it's closer to the venom gland, so it pretty much just trickles straight down the rear tooth. And these guys have evolved. Originally, people used to think it was just a groove, but they've actually evolved tiny hypodermic needles, so the venom actually comes through a hollow fang and is pumped into the prey, rather than, there are other species that have venom that just trickles down the rear fang.
Wow.
So our leopards are more evolved, but, from a biology point.
What's next? What is this
They
one?
do stink.
Oh, no, I don't like that.
That's a tiger snake. So you got this is specifically a western tiger snake as well, so one that we get locally here. Obviously, majority of the mines that we're dealing with are not going to see these guys. We still often bring them up so they can see, because so many people living back here in Perth region, or the great southern southwestern region as well, where these guys are really popular. So, look, highly toxic venom, but these guys have very small fang length, just like the brown snakes that I've mentioned that are still so dangerous. But you're looking at an average length of 2 to 3 mil with these guys, even when they're fully grown. The species that you get on the east coast do grow to much larger levels, especially the guys outside of Tasmania.
Tigers over on the east coast?
Yeah.
Really? They look the same, or they're just, they're the same colouring? Just longer?
They can have similar, but you'll actually see some with
Once again,
more
really
of an
cool
orangey
colouring.
or a whitey look to them. And to me, they look like they have a bit more thicker bands rather than stripes.
I don't know if I can do this. This one's too hectic for me.
Wriggly. Tigers have a massive reputation for chasing people. Tiger snakes, people talk about, they're always just after people and stuff. It's not necessarily the case at all. They're just like any snake.
Can you not let it come over by me, bro? Please.
It's all good. I'll well and truly be comfortable stepping in before
Thanks,
she
bro.
but
Thanks,
she
bro.
won't. But
It
she's
just got real fast just then.
yeah, she's definitely a very chilled tiger snake.
Okay.
Literally, we are in. Look, if I was to go pick one up from the wild right now, it's going to take them a while. I find in captivity these guys get quite used to people.
Okay.
Very still dangerous within the vivarium, because sometimes if they can be cornered because we're not out
We've
there
also
trying to get
got
them
one
used.
in a studio space.
We're talking much smaller area.
go
But
that
yeah,
way,
if I
can't go
put
that way.
her
Go
up
that
in
way.
that corner there, she could definitely find that quite threatening with us coming over the top of her. But quite a relaxed snake when they get a chance to sort of build their confidence around humans and things like that.
Scales are a little bit different compared to the last two.
The death adders tend to have a bit more of a keeled scale, so it pops a bit more.
Even the pythons was different.
Yeah, you're dead right with the
larger.
pythons because the venomous or what's not a python essentially, all their scales from those belly scales or those ventral scales, they're all exactly the same size around the whole body. Whereas the pythons, they will progressively get smaller as they go from those middle belly ventral scales.
Well, that's quite cool.
So
definitely not something to rely on at a distance because obviously if you know what you're talking, if you know what you've been looking at before, you have a pretty confident call on what you think it may be. But that's looking at the scales here now. She's not really doing too much, as Scott was saying. She's quite docile for a tiger snake, whereas
there's
like a wild one will be moving very quickly. So to get close enough to see, all the scales are actually all the same size, you're putting yourself in the firing line. So it's definitely not something to rely on or go off. It's just a bit of a fact about them.
You guys know about the island just off the coast of Perth and Carnac Island?
Yep.
And there's, I think it might be the highest concentration of tiger snakes. Oh, fuck me! Sorry, shit.
That's all right.
Interesting story with Carnac Island there and tiger snakes. There's still a working theory on how they originated there.
Someone brought them there, right?
Well, that's one theory, but there's a more recent study that is actually suggesting that he did take them there in I believe, the 1800s. But they actually believe he probably supplemented his name. He was a snake showman, Rocky something, and I can get it for you if you do want me, because I was only reading the paper again last week.
If you can. Oh, so you can control it more by holding it on the tail. Okay.
We don't like to imply this on any of our training techniques because I don't have the faith to teach someone who doesn't really have much experience with snakes how to safely being able to touch them. So we have basically a no skin to scale policy at Snake RnR, which is the reason why it's been going for so long, and there has been 0 bites not only on the course but even going forward. So it's one way that we can ensure everybody stays safe with the service that we're trying to provide for them.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the tools is they're your go-to. But as Scott said earlier, it's a mental control, mental stability. That's what's going to really do yourself the biggest favour at the end of the day. These just assist you and help you out.
Yep.
But that's what really makes everything work for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Which you can see everything he's doing is so smooth, calm.
Yeah.
And Ty obviously has a massive amount of emotional control, especially dealing with these guys. So he makes.
But even at the end of the day, like that fear we've been talking about, like that fear's still in me, whether it shows or not. But I do know, like, if you're caught slipping, they are what we call, like a captive raised snake that have been caught by potentially 2, 3, 4, 6, 800 people before. Yep. But if you give them a chance, they'll take it. They've got their fangs. They're not modified in any way. Their glands are going to be full, and they will happily have a go if you give them a chance anyway.
Yep. So let's talk about the snake catching kits.
Yep.
Right. So you supply them, Scott?
Yeah, we do supply them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Get the full complement, the bag,
we've got
run through the kit.
There are multiple different techniques for snake catching, and I can't sit there and say one kit is going to be better for someone else. It's primarily what you can sort of see around sitting up, things like your snake tongs. Now, we will only buy one particular supplier from the US, from a company called Midwest Tongs, and the guy that designed them, who
Gentle
I do speak
Giant
with,
Tong.
They are the Gentle Giant Tong, and then you've got what we sell them as mini grabbers, rolls off the mouth a little easier than I believe what they've got them on the US websites, but the machine tong. But they're both designed to be perfectly safe for the snake. Now, there are many tongs out there, especially cheaper designed ones, that don't have the recurve in the top part of the tong that allow for you to put way too much pressure through the snake. Whereas these ones, as we got earlier today, you put your finger in there and you felt that you can't actually put a ton of pressure through the snake. So each part has been machined to be, very precise, and that makes life really easy. So normally we'll teach a technique where it involves using a hook and a tong, or we use a hook and a bag, so a triangular hoop bag, which is similar to if you think a windsock out at an airport. Yeah, nice and long, but with a flat base. So you can place it sort of on the ground, encourage the snake to go in, or you can lift the snake up with a hook and place it inside the bag.
Awesome.
Or again, keeping your hands clear of the snake and just reducing that chance of you being bitten.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the big thing for the mines and what they want. They don't want people going out there to make entertaining TV. I always
Absolutely not like what we're doing.
No,
No,
a boring snake catch is a good snake catch. If you've
Yep.
made it boring, it means the snake was calm and it means you were calm. So it
And
again
release-
wouldn't make for good TV, but that's
So
yeah.
is there anything where there's a particular distance to release a snake? What do you guys teach out on a course?
Ty and I were talking about this before, and
Are you putting them into a car to drive them out, or are you just
will
taking them
depend
out to a
on-
bush?
It will depend on location and depend if there is a snake in the middle of camp and it really needs to be relocated because it's been found inside a laundry or living under a donga numerous times. It needs to be taken out for the safety of the snake and obviously any personnel that are living around there. That's where we're encouraged to find a new location for the snake. So I won't say that there is a fixed distance of saying it needs to be 80 kilometres away or any specific
I'd say
distance. It comes down to
standard 100 kilometres.
just into another
That
state.
that could nearly be out of their jurisdiction. but
It's more about the neighbouring mines. It's more about finding a favourable location for the snake to thrive in. And so we give some tips and tricks and things like that about each species, what they should look for, or just in general things that they need. I mean, the key thing, like anything, they need a source of food, water, and shelter. If you find somewhere that has fresh water, that's going to be, especially in the more arid parts where we tend to have our mines, that's going to be a source of life, for so many wild creatures.
Yeah.
If you identify things like seed-eating birds, they never stray far from fresh water as well. So there's sort of little indicators that I always encourage people to look for.
Yep.
What I try to do, though, is avoid if there's one small pocket of water somewhere and you're catching snakes every week, that you're not overpopulating the one area and just releasing them. So there are a few considerations. But another consideration might be, for example, if you're working in exploration and you might be at a camp for a very small time period, or you might only be somewhere for a day just running a survey or something. You don't need to take the snake very far away. You could just take it to a near bush 100 metres away, just release it in there to keep it within the area.
Okay.
It's only if the snake is in an area where it's a true problem, i.e. in the middle of a camp, if you took it to the outskirts of camp and just released it into a bush and it was living under there, there's a very real chance that snake would come back in that area. But it's also around a lot of people and a lot of vehicles, and vehicles kill so many snakes. And for me, part of teaching snake relocation is also about preventing bites to people.
Yeah. Oh, well, should we move on to the next one?
Well, yeah, I reckon.
Ty, why do you take that thing off, man?
that's getting the shot right there. That GoPro is getting the shot. I hope it is anyway.
That's awesome, Ty.
Yeah. And even so, like that table is such a smooth, slippery surface that it's really, as you said, it's just doing burnouts. It's getting no traction whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you see that speed, but in like the grass or the ground or the dirt, it's going to get some pretty good hookup. And when they want to, they can move really quickly.
Yeah.
But you can see that it's not having a go at me whatsoever. It's not having a go at any of us. It just kind of wants to get away.
Yeah. All right, bro. On to the next one.
All right, we'll roll straight into the next one. So we've got, the king, arguably one of the most biggest venomous snakes in Australia as well. Pseudechus australis, or commonly known as the Mulga or king brown.
Wow. Okay. So, what length do these suckers get up to?
Reportedly, I couldn't say exactly. I mean, what they say the largest or the longest reported snake in Australia, but that's reported, so it doesn't mean that is actually the longest one living, but it's just the longest one reported, was a coastal taipan at 3.11 metres long. So it wouldn't surprise me if one of these got to that size as well, or if it already hasn't.
3 metres long.
Just over 3 metres long, yeah.
And there is someone now quite recently that I've read now that someone's claimed 3.3 for a Mulga. These have always been pipping, the coastal taipan and the coastal taipan for length. These guys certainly for weight, but now they're saying length. They've got it's a tricky one. And out in the wild,
Yeah.
Either way, once you hit that 3 metre mark, it's like being in the meter barra club to me. It just doesn't really matter if it gets much bigger. That's massive.
Yeah. Okay.
No, he's not 3 metres, so don't just manage your expectations.
He's got a really cool. Oh, he's got a really cool. He's got a really cool colouring.
Yeah, so it's nice light. I mean, Mulgas, they can come in various different colorations as well, but they're not going to have like patterns or bands or anything like that throughout the body. So it'll generally be whatever the head and neck colour is, that'll transition throughout that whole body. So if they're light in colour, the whole body will be light. If they're dark, the whole thing will be dark. You will get some form of coloration in the scales, like there could be highlights, but that will be consistent throughout the whole of the body as well. One thing that black snakes, which Mulgas are part of that genus, they all have in common, which when they feel threatened or their defensive display, they flatten their neck out like the cobras do. They like hood that neck out and even the body, the whole body,
Really?
to make themselves appear bigger. And that's just their first warning defense.
Oh, shit.
First warning defense for
Huh?
an intruder,
head.
essentially.
It saw that or it knew?
Oh, no, probably just the movement of my hand. You would have...
Oh, bro, don't worry about that. Just protect
No,
me.
it's just doing the... These guys are quite strong as well. So
Yep.
you'll find... What I might do is I'll just...
Oh, we can take that off the table. We can take that off the table.
He'll just be a smart ass about it. And
He's a very gentle snake, that's for sure. Obviously,
What's his name?
He's quite large, but he's a very
Yeah.
just classic gentleman.
he's Bert.
Oh, this is
If
Bert.
this takes Bert,
okay.
I always describe if I take him on course.
Yeah.
This guy's a Labrador. He's big. He's probably we've cut him down a bit, but he was borderline overweight, and he's
Really?
probably still up there. Yeah, I'd like to see him, continue to lean up. Especially he's healthy, but and he's very placid. We can trust him probably more. I wouldn't get complacent with him just because he's a venomous snake, but
Yep.
we can trust him a lot. But when food's around, just like a Labrador, this dude becomes a bit of a beast. So sometimes when we have mice out, he can smell them and he'll be biting on the backside of the lock on his vivarium. You can see the venom coming down like he's just...
Oh, shoot. He's ready to go.
Yeah. And it's not that he wants to attack. It's not us at all. It's I can taste that the mice are in the air. I'm ready to go. And the Mulgas are all, quite food-driven.
So this video that I saw of the snake was like a black snake. Mm-hmm. And they said it was a mulga.
They can get very dark in coloration. Spotted mulgas as well. I mean, they tend to be a bit sort of speckled, can be sort of black and sort of speckled. There's a different species, same genus, very similar.
Okay.
But yeah, they can. We've got, again, we show you different variations, about 24 different colour variations that Brian
true.
Bush had, pictures on course and sort of say just a king brown is not a brown coloured snake. It's a very misleading name because they can be, especially some with a colour variation that almost look like a mahogany colour. And
wow.
we've got a couple of those at work as well. But it's looking at things like the very large, the scales are actually quite large and sort of pop and have a bit of a reticulated pattern, almost like a bit of an, like someone got an art line and went around them as well. Much larger head than what you're going to see on the brown snakes. And that defensive posturing that Ty mentioned earlier is another telltale sign that you're dealing with a black snake. And usually, especially for Western Australia, you can usually narrow that down to sometimes one or maybe two different species of black snake that are in the area. So they're slightly, as you start to get better at snake identification, they're a little bit easier to identify than, say, brown snakes that can be quite tricky and very, very varied at a quick glance, that is.
Yep. So the do's and do nots when seeing one of these in the wild.
Just like any snake, just give it a wide berth.
Yep.
I mean, the term guarda for the western brown, so it's a Noongar word, but it roughly translates to take the long way round. It's the best advice for dealing with a brown snake because they're quite reactive to movement, but any snake, it's pretty solid. Just give them a wide berth. And if you are, obviously qualified catcher going in for a catch, everything needs to be smooth, controlled as much as possible. It's not an irate activity.
Do you have to be a qualified snake catcher on a mine site? Is that something that mining
that would be
companies...
every mine site would have a different... I'd be with work health and safety rules. I'd be very surprised if anyone would allow anyone to be relocating snakes without formal training because of the repercussions. Now, certainly the companies we primarily, our main sort of companies we're working with, Rio, FMG, BHP,
Awesome.
Westgold.
The big ones.
Yeah,
Westgold
Roy
gets
Hill,
you in?
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so there'd be many more, but they're certainly the ones that Rio have got us doing.
Well, the big three.
Most.
You guys are... That's awesome.
That's certainly one that you do need a course, and obviously for their mines, it would need to be one of their recognised providers. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that. The head on. Did you say that the head does some?
Yeah, it flares out, so that neck, same as like what the cobras are renowned for. They call it hooding out. So it flares. It's not just the neck as well. Like sometimes the whole body can be quite flat, but you'll definitely notice it more in that sort of neck area. So it's just more of a defense technique for them, and it's like a warning basically. So obviously all snakes have the ability to strike.
So it's not before they attack. It's just a warning to a predator.
It's there. It's in their process before attacking, but they'll at least give you a bit of a heads up that they're not happy. Whereas other species, like Scott was saying, with the brown snakes, how they're very reactive, they go straight into that sort of S position, ready to strike, and obviously that's the end game for any snake, is a strike and a bite. Whereas these guys, they'll flatten their neck out first, then they'll carry on with that process after. So they kind of give themselves away, which is makes it quite easy when we sort of run through the course on how we can identify the difference between a black and a brown snake based off their defensive techniques or their defensive display that they're showing us.
Yep. And same thing, same food group. They'd be going for rodents.
These guys are well renowned to pretty well predate only on other reptiles, and they love eating other snakes. So they have a very high immunity to any other venomous snakes.
So these snakes will just hunt other snakes. Yeah. How are they doing it? How are they doing it? Are they staying coiled up and then jumping out?
They're
these guys are high on the move, high activity, cover a lot of ground, have their obviously their home that they reside at or area.
Is it are they burrowing? What are they doing?
They're hijacking someone else's.
They come in and someone's built a fresh house and they're occupying it with their family. They'll come in, take the family, and then take the new house. Yeah.
This is a gangster snake. Yeah, that's crazy.
Their manner's not great.
But no knock on the door, no nothing.
There's a lot of footage you'll see out there. The inland taipan or the fierce snake, the world's deadliest snake. There's a lot of footage of the mulga going out and eating that snake and things like that. So it's they do have an ability to process other snake venom, and they have a resistance, but they're a very strong, powerful snake. When they bite, they tend to hang on and just keep on pumping venom through. And as Ty mentioned before, when they're eating, when they keep on pumping venom over their prey, that helps break it down as well as their just a massive amount of venom.
Have you guys seen that YouTube video of like the lizard climbing up the rocks and all of those snakes? Yeah. Supposedly, I think David Attenborough said that it was the first time that he had seen snakes working together in like a team to attack or to try and attack and kill a prey.
I reckon they were working individually to sort themselves out, because I don't reckon any of them would have shared that meal. But yeah, that's pretty phenomenal. I think the marine iguanas, from memory, just trying to make that desperate dash out to get to the ocean there and then chill out on the rock, and
viewing.
It sure does.
All those snakes just chasing that bloody lizard. Yeah, it was crazy. It was
and then
awesome.
He shrugs a tackle and gets out. So
yeah, it was crazy. That was wicked.
Yeah,
awesome. So there's no flick of the tail with these guys. These guys are not trying to attract their prey. They are just
they're actively out hunting it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. Being I said that they pretty well predate on reptiles, like all snakes, they're all opportunists. Mm-hmm. So if they come across a feed, they will rarely refuse it.
I feel pretty much really good right now.
Weirdly, because I struggle to believe this, but I've been told a couple of times, there's been a couple of reports that they believe they've seen them even at Roadkill, which I've never heard of, a lapid's going and having a go. But again, I'll use old busho and just having a pick at something. It's just they don't normally have the teeth to tear away, but they're at least having a poke around. So interesting, but although these are snake eaters, there are still snakes that will go after these guys and eat them as well.
Really?
I mean, they're...
this one looks quite slimy. No, obviously they're not. It's just
a shine, that iridescent shine. What Scott was saying earlier about all snakes do have it, and I guess just with the lighting we got here, it's just really accentuating it.
Well,
it's not like a frog or anything like that. Grab a frog, it's slimy. If a snake is slimy, it's been in something that was slimy. It's not unnaturally.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess even with the venom, as you were saying before, no one's actually died from a king brown bite since 1969. Well, that's the most recent death. So it's been a long time in between drinks, so to speak. But the myotoxins in the Mulga's venom, it's a very necrotic, muscle-destroying toxin. So hence why Busho's finger ended up in such the way. And I guess even, a very long time, even down the track, it's still doing damage, so to speak.
Wow. Bro, what are you doing?
What do you mean?
So his nice, calm demeanour will be great. But you can even just see, again, once he's nice and calm there.
Did you guys plan this?
Nah, not really.
With Bert, he's just sort of, you wouldn't trust many of our others, but it's...
But even still, like, if you keep your movements down to a minimal, it's like people say, can they smell fear? They can't smell fear, but your fear will turn into an action. They'll notice that action.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying. That you were just so calm, bro. That was crazy. As it was coming down the end of the stick.
I mean,
and you wouldn't do that in a snake catch. Like, you wouldn't sit there and
you're just
in an air-conditioned room in a
plus
snake that you understand as well.
Yeah,
Very
plus
different.
obviously working with him, you get to pick up the personality on the snake. So obviously we don't encourage any of this sort of stuff on the course, but it's more demonstration purpose only.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like if that was, I would be like, please do not ever put yourself in this position.
Oh my God.
Safety is like the number one. That's what we bang on about. But at the end of the day,
the man. It's awesome.
Bert is the man.
He's real chilled now, eh?
Yeah.
What's the go with overpopulation?
It's their chance of survival is very low. The chance of making it to adulthood or even old enough to be able to breed is still quite low.
Oh, really?
So they do have so many. Not all snakes are born, from eggs. Many of them have live birth, tigers, death adders, and that's just to name a few. There's quite a lot. So if you're at school, remember hearing only reptiles, all reptiles lay eggs as part of that identifying feature.
Yep.
It's really quite an incorrect statement, especially when we're talking snakes. And, the bobtails as well, live birth.
All right, so next species on the list, genus of brown snake, Pseudonasia affinis, or commonly known as the Dugite.
Oh.
So, yeah, we'll just see how this one comes out. It's pretty cool in here, but once again, that doesn't really mean too much with brown snakes. We'll get her out on the table, see if we can get her to settle. I dare say we will be able to, but I guess any sort of quick movements around the table is going to really kind of stir her up a little bit. So we'll pop the lid off, eh?
Yeah.
Just because you've asked every time too, Chuck, that's who you're meeting.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Chuck and Norris.
Yeah,
Norris.
we got two of them together, Chuck and Norris.
Okay.
So it's a pretty decent size Dugite. These are one of the largest species of brown snakes. So eastern brown still being the biggest. You can get them larger than this guy here. But you'll even see a little bit of that defensive posturing. Oh, okay, no, he's already relaxed, but just starting to coil back a little bit in that S position.
Yeah.
But yeah, quite. Yeah.
I like his colouring.
And that pseudonasia is actually, that means false cobra. That's the translation. That's probably something they identified. Oh, it's lifting itself up. It's part of the elapid family. Pretty much, in the earlier days when they started discovering more elapids, they knew about the cobra so much before any others. So a lot of stuff was in reference to adders or in reference to cobras.
Yeah, this one seems to like getting his head up off the ground.
Yeah, so, and you sort of see that flattening a little bit, and that's that defensive brown snake posturing.
Oh, I heard it.
Yeah.
I heard it make the noise.
Yep. So all snakes have the ability to hiss.
Yep.
With pythons, I don't have the reason why pythons hiss, but from my experience, especially with the brown snakes, when you do hear them hiss, it's probably because they're getting annoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very small, and it's the same principle behind it. If we're hyperventilating and we're stressed out, they do a very small windpipe too. So if you're sort of breathing heavily, you're going to, out of a very small windpipe, you're going to get a hiss. Now, I'm not going to lie, I can no longer hear the frequency of hissing. Yep. So on course, I usually get told if they're hissing, but brown snakes, they often say, oh man, you can really hear him hiss in the bin and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
I can't hear it anymore, so I take people's word for it. But even that, he's not getting, reactive at you. I should stop talking with my hands, but it's...
he seems to look at me just then and go for me.
But yeah, so if he was to strike me and bite me right now, there wouldn't be a lot of pain straight away, and it worries you when people do talk about, but if you're bitten, you'd know because you'd be able to sort of tell. There is no telltale way with brown snakes to definitely know that was an envenomation. So it was just, it could just be a single scratch. It doesn't need to be two prominent fang marks, which some people think, oh no, it wasn't a proper, it was just a scratch or just a glance.
Oh, you would go to the doctor no matter what.
I mean, people haven't before.
Yeah.
Or people have...
So they've actually seen the snake like scratch them or just the face on the skin, and then they've just been like, wow, that was lucky.
There are people, there's some people that have actually put the effort into going to catch or kill the snake after being bitten, and that movement is what sort of costs
Is that me, bro, just moving my arm?
That's all right.
It could be me as well. I'm putting my hands out as well, so I've got to stop. It's very hard for me not to talk with my hands.
Yeah.
But,
Mate. Yeah. It is very hard to... Oh, that was cool.
I'll probably just this be the only one where I'll probably just focus on her and Scotty can fill you in.
Yeah, this one's moving and shaking. So how long do these ones get?
Well, I always just prefer to say up to 2 metres. Some people claim, 1.8. Some people I've seen written as well up to 2.2. I think up to 2 metres is a very big dugite. And the eastern brown, obviously on the east coast, is a similar, quite a heavy-bodied for a brown snake. Yeah, they're quite similar to the dugite, but a bit bigger again. I like the
banding. I just heard it hissing. I like the banding. It's got quite wide bands.
Yeah, and these guys come incredibly varied. We could bring all 13 dugites at work, and many of them actually look quite different. We have ones that are very pale with spots. We have some that are basically ones still very, very dark brown, almost black, with no pattern whatsoever. We've got a coppery, his brother, Norris, is actually almost like in the sun, almost a coppery colour with black spots and that.
So what changes its, what defines its colour? Is it born that way? Is it?
You will usually see them change their... they're going to be the most vibrant when they're born and brightly patterned, and you can see it start to change. You're probably starting to see a bit of a change here with the bands the bands are becoming faded. So it would have been this guy would have been a very pretty snake when he was younger with the extra bands and patterning. But
how old is Chuck?
Because he was I believe originally from the previous owner was actually wild caught and then brought through on a taker's license, so registered through DBCA and then added to a license. There's no way of truly knowing. Because he started out in the wild, and there's a few
wasn't hatched.
Yeah, no, and a few of ours have got that, especially with the brown snakes, where we put them through licenses and then as adults, because there's a lot of work from getting a hatchling, and then there is some breeders out there, but sometimes breeders will be breeding a snake for its looks and things, and will want to charge top dollar and things like that, whereas I'm happy for it needs to be a snake that looks like that type of snake. It doesn't need to be a special, morph, as they call it. And ideally for us, it's one that hasn't been handled too much, especially when you're talking the Mulgas. Those guys get so used to people, just like Bert. So Bert's probably by far our most placid Mulga snake. But
I like Bert.
Yeah,
the brown species, like brown snakes, or genus of brown snakes in general, in captivity, it takes... It's probably nearly impossible to get all that natural instinct out of them anyway. Yeah. Like as Scotty said, the other species, they can somewhat domesticate themselves where they can be not typically how they normally are in the wild, whereas, the browns, doesn't matter what it really is, they're always going to show that or give you at least some hint of that natural ability, that speed that they can do if they really wanted to on a regular basis.
Well, gents, this is, I know for a fact that I'm not going to hold one. I know for a fact that I could probably, after doing one of your courses, which I think I might actually book myself into. Do you run any in Perth or just out on? You do.
We run them up at Mundaring, and we've got a training facility up there, and an 8-hour course.
I think I might book myself. I might book myself into one because. Sorry, mate.
That's right. That's right.
I think that after hanging out with them for a day. I might be able to catch them. I just know that after seeing this, I hissing like crazy.
Mouth popping open a bit now too.
That I don't want to hold one. So I'm happy to... This has been amazing. So thank you guys very much. It's been educational.
Even with the course like that, we're not out there. I don't say let's go out and this is how we catch snakes. It's like when on that off chance where that snake's trapped somewhere, this is where that skill is going to come in handy for you. But if not, you'll still learn how to, I guess, appreciate them from a very respectable distance. So even if you're out holidaying somewhere and you're in a bush and a snake comes, you know what to do. Because let's be honest, if you're in Australia and we've got those 214 species, as Scott has already said, you're going to come in contact with one somewhere at some stage. So it's not literally just to catch them. It's also how to act and be around and be comfortable around them by giving them space, essentially, and they will bugger off. They'll go do their own thing. Then you're fine.
And then, on the odd chance that there was an issue, the first aid.
Yeah.
That first aid training is going to be paramount. So that is why I would say that's why the mining company should get in contact with you, right?
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. The first aid training, the proof is out there in the statistics. It is 100% life-saving, and it's so easy to know. And I think there is that misconception. You do a bit of first aid, you do your basic first aid course, but it doesn't go into snake bites very well. And as I said, we go right down to the actual pressures, the measurable pressures for pressure for arm, the leg, and then what to do if you're bitten on the torso, face, because there is different methods. But not just relying on here's a smart snake bite bandage, I'll pull the rectangle till it's a square, explaining what the pressures are, putting a blood pressure cuff on you, and then you can actually feel what that pressure feels like when it's on your arm or on your leg rather than the guess game.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks very much for coming in and spending the time with me today. Thanks for co-hosting an episode with Ty. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, bro.
Do you have any parting words, Ty?
Parting words. I guess, if you need any work done, or you want to become your own snake catcher, not just for work but even in your local community, there's some pretty good steps to go through. Snake RnR is definitely one of the good steps to go through.
That's the company I would choose.
We will definitely point you in the right direction. Between one of the 3 trainers we have, you're going to get a very high quality, high class learning from the day. Yeah, you get a certificate with it, but it's you could do a lot of really things where you get a certificate where you still don't really understand. So
Your
I guess we like to really
EWP course is a tick and flick, and this is certainly not something like that.
And I guess end of the day, the safest way to catch any snake is just to not catch it at all.
Yep. Beautiful, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, all good.
We'll get these back into the bin. What an episode. I think I've nearly conquered my fear of snakes. Thanks very much for tuning into another episode of The Gold Room. If you're a mining company, even if you're not a mining company, if you've jumped across this, if you're in WA, the great state of WA, be sure to give Snake RnR a call. You'll be able to find their web address on the bottom of this YouTube video. Thanks very much. Cheers.